So thank you very much for giving me this chance to be able to share with you some of the things that are important in the work that we do. My name is George Sugai, and I work at the University of Connecticut, and I co-direct the National Center on Positive Behavioral Interventions and Supports. And I'm also the director at UConn for the Center for Behavioral Education and Research. And what we do is we provide schools, states, districts, and so forth access to some of the best evidence-based practices for behavioral supports that we can find. And what we try to do is pick those practices that are the most evidence-based, have the biggest effects, and can be the most durably implemented or sustained. The reason I emphasize that is because we're very interested in how the implementation of best practice actually falls out in schools. To give you a little bit of an idea about how we organize our work, we have this umbrella called Schoolwide Positive Behavioral Supports. And what that is a framework that allows us to build a continuum of evidence-based interventions. And that continuum, many schools have already identified as being the multi-tiered prevention or kind of response to intervention kind of an approach. And what that really means on the behavior side is that we identify those things that all kids within a school can benefit from for their social development growth, and also to prevent the development of problem behaviors. And what we've learned from that is that one of the best things you can do is identify some of the 3 or 4 most important social skills for a school to have in place, like respect or responsibility or caring or safety. And we help schools develop lesson plans for teaching those and building them into the curriculum and the language of the school. If schools do a good job of implementing those basic structures, what happens then is that we, as I like to say, capture about 90% of the kids, 80% of the kids or so, under that basic umbrella of a positive school climate. And then we start saying to ourselves, well, what do those kids need that's a little extra to be successful? We try to stay away from a get tough approach to responding, which means do more aversives. But instead what we try to do is say, if a kid's not responding to our basic interventions, what can we do to be a little bit more systematic and efficient with that kid? So for example, at Tier 2, what happens is that we provide a little bit more monitoring, we provide a little bit more adult attention, we give more feedback to the student on how he or she's doing, have them participate in more targeted social skills instruction. It's a little bit more concentrated, but it's at a group level. Then what happens is we tend to capture many of those kids with respect to being successful. Then there's always a few kids, 5 to 7% of kids, who don't respond to either Tier 1 or Tier 2 supports. And at that point we start providing more individualized assistance, which is more creating, kind of in a way, looking at their strengths and challenges and saying, well, what can we do best to maximize those strengths and minimize the kind of limitations that are present. So that's what the continuum looks like. And we organize our interventions along that continuum in responding to those students. Now, to make that work, there are a couple kind of like practices that we invest in. Things like universal screening, which means we check all kids on a regular basis to see how they're doing. We do continuous progress monitoring, especially for kids who are receiving Tier 2 and Tier 3 supports. We make sure that we are checking the fidelity or accuracy of our implementation, because one thing we're finding is you can have an evidence-based practice, but if you don't implement it with fidelity, you're not going to get the outcomes that you need. The other thing that goes along with those practices is that we spent quite a bit of time focusing on what is important or relevant to the local culture. And that's the family value systems, the community value systems, the language of the membership of the community, the kinds of things that kids bring to the classroom from families and communities. And we try to build those into the interventions as well, school-wide as well as individual kid. So that kind of summarizes the critical kind of practices that go along with the continuum and how we address all kids. I think the other thing to add to this is that the implementation is actually not one that you can easily get in a one-shot in service. We work with school teams. When a school says they want this, we say identify a group of individuals, existing team or a new team, that has an administrator who's very supportive of the effort, so you can identify the need for it. We work with that team to build an action plan for how they would implement these evidence-based practices and build the continuum within their school. So it's not the traditional in-service where we say, here's what best practices, go do it. Instead, what we say is, here's a set of best practices. Let's help you develop the structures for implementing it in your school. So implementation is actually where a lot of professional development occurs. On that team, we have parent members. For middle schools and high schools, we have student representation. We make sure that we have classroom representatives as well as non-classroom participants. And we try to make sure we have community members involved. And that team drives the implementation of the continuum development and its efforts. Now, having said that, working with individual kids, classrooms, and schools, the shift is that we're now focusing quite a bit of our attention on districts and states. And what I'd like to end with a little bit of discussion about how districts and states are important. What we found is that individual schools can implement with accuracy and durability if the district also invests in a similar set of expectations and approaches. We like to have the districts say, how do we organize our initiatives along the continuum? How do we provide our supports to schools based on their ability to respond to those supports? So it's been an interesting way to think about districts as being another way to disseminate and implement those practices. We help build district level teams. That team is something that will always be there when we leave, so we can ensure some coaching and some coordination. And like districts, like schools, we also work with states, and we help the states develop policies. We help the states develop infrastructure to also provide supports to districts and schools. So there's a consistent set of expectations across state, district, region, school, classroom, kid, family, community. What we found is there's greater durability if we think about the whole continuum of implementation sites as opposed to just the classroom. So I guess to summarize, Schoolwide PBS is not really an intervention necessarily. What it is a framework for organizing best practices. And what we invest quite a bit of our time in is using information data to identify those best practices. We try to make sure that those practices are aligned with what are the most important outcomes that are valued by the school or classroom. And then we spend our time with the infrastructure to make sure that those practices can be implemented with fidelity. So that kind of gives you an encapsulated look of what we do. There are a number of places to go to if you want more information. If you're a state, you can go to your state level PBS team if there is one. You can go to your special ed departments. They'll also provide information because of the strong link to special ed. You can go to our national center. We have a website that's pbis.org, pbis.org, standing for Positive Behavioral Intervention Supports. And just about everything we know or have disseminated is at that site, and you can get quite a bit of materials there. One particularly important piece is if you go to that website and click on links, at links there's a state map, and you can click on any state and you can find out where you can get access to local information as well. And that should be quite helpful to you. Just so you get an idea about where this came from, the U.S. Department of Education provides our supports. We have a grant from the Office of Special Ed Programs, and they've been very helpful in organizing our technical assistance dissemination. And so you can also go to the federal site for OSEP, Office of Special Ed Programs again, and get access to the materials as well. So I hope that information is helpful to you, and you can also get access to me if you'd like at the University of Connecticut in the Department of Ed Psychology.
Thank you very much.